freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearms.com, your nationwide hometown gun shop. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our show today is we are doing a series called Ameri-CAN, talking about the can-do spirit that is part of our American DNA.
Absolutely. Our lives have been turned completely upside down with this COVID-19, this coronavirus. And we have been told over and again all of the places that we can't go and the things that we can't do. But in this series, we're going to talk to some experts in their field and ask them all of the ways that we still can learn and grow, train and connect, and expand our freedoms in ways that maybe we hadn't even thought about before. And our guest today is Connor Boyack. Connor is the founder and president of Libertas Institute, a free market think tank in Utah. Named one of Utah's most politically influential people by the Salt Lake Tribune, Connor's leadership has led to dozens of legislative victories spanning a wide range of areas such as privacy, government transparency, property rights, drug policy, education, personal freedom, and more. A public speaker and author of 21 books, Connor is best known for the Tuttle Twins books, a children's series introducing young readers to economic, political, and civic principles. Welcome to the show, Connor.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I think I said your last name correctly, yes?
Yeah, it's Boyack. Boys who yak. We yak a lot.
I love it.
He's written 21 books.
21 books. One for each year he's been alive, apparently. Look how young this guy is.
Connor, I don't think I've read 21 books. Wow. It's got to be keep you on your toes, right?
Well, you got a lot of books behind you, so either you're not telling the truth right now, or it's all decoration. So,
well, or Cheryl.
I'm a bit of a reader, and I just have to brag that among those that belong on the shelf behind me, but I pulled off, are all of these. These are your Tuttle Twin books, and I love them. I was so excited when, thank you for writing them. I was so excited when I was able to connect with you because I love how you've distilled down works like in this one, it's Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. And you've put it in a story that young children and adults, kind of like Cliff Notes, right, can understand and use in their own lives, our own lives. So where did the idea come from to write this series?
So as you said in my bio, I run kind of a freedom fighting organization, Libertas Institute. We say that we change hearts, minds, and laws. And so we do a lot of legal reform, a lot of education, fighting bad laws, trying to create more freedom and so forth. And I'm a father of 2 children. So several years ago, I found myself wanting to share with my little kids what I did that day, because I would ask them, hey, what did you do that day? And I lacked the vocabulary to explain to an 8-year-old about eminent domain, right, that I was fighting. Or how do you talk to, your 6-year-old about the free market, and we're trying to, fix this protectionist law that hurt food trucks and prevented them from just giving people food. And so I went on Amazon. I'm like, hey, there's got to be some, like a book or something. And there was nothing. And I spent a couple of weeks kind of being frustrated, oh man, if only there were something. And then I realized, hey, you dolt, you preach entrepreneurship all the time. Here's an opportunity. So we did the first book, response was phenomenal. And so to us, that was kind of the market signal to say, hey, there's an interest here kind of in the broader, community. And so let's do more of these. And so we've done 11 children's books now. We've got books for teens. We've got a free market curriculum for families, a weekly curriculum. We've got a card game, all kinds of stuff. And we're just having a ball.
Nice.
Card game, you say? I didn't know about this.
Yeah. If you go to TuttleTwins.com/products, you can see everything we've done. And we released the card game, I think, late last year. And it's just kind of a way for people to, kids and their parents, to reinforce the ideas they learned about in the books by creating their own Tuttle Twins stories with all the different kind of cards. And there's some fun little prompts and things like that in the game.
I am going to be all over that. And it's so funny because this week we have interviewed our son-in-law, who he's an IT guy, but his little entrepreneur toe in the water is as a like a board game reviewer. And
cool.
So he's huge into board games. He's always bringing new games for us.
And card games.
Yes,
Yeah.
and card games for us to play. And so this is going to be such a beautiful tie-in. We're definitely going to look that up. And so when I first discovered you, I think it was, something that came up on my Instagram or whatever, maybe my Facebook. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant. But my older grandchild is almost 6 now. She was super young. So I can't remember when did you start this?
So the target age range for the books is about 5 to 11. Now, obviously, every child is different. We have some 4-year-olds who, read the books. My daughter was 3 when we started, and I'm not going to kid myself that she understood all the concepts, but she was engaged by the pictures enough to listen to the story over and over and over again, and now she understands the ideas. So 5 is kind of the sweet spot when the kids can really start to understand. And, oddly, we've even had, you pointed out the parents too, who it's kind of cliff notes for. We have plenty of teenagers who, these books are clearly kids' books kind of beneath their age, but the ideas that they have are fresh and interesting. And so even though our sweet spot is 5 to 11 years of age, where we comfortably, can relate to the kids in that range, we do, the books are attractive to and informative for kids who are younger and older than that as well.
Well, I bought them, I want to say like maybe 2 years ago, and just have had them on the shelf and waiting until I felt like, she would have some idea of what our story time the book was about. And so I have, through this hashtag quarantine life that we're in, started reading those to her. And it's like you said, it's not like she comes away with, like she's going to go write a dissertation about it. She's 5, but we're planting those seeds. We're having the age appropriate conversations,
right?
And, from the earliest age, helping her understand what this is all about and why it's so important to us. So I'm just very excited. And so as I want to add to my set, do you sell them individually then? Because I bought these as like a group.
Yep. When people go to TuttleTwins.com, we sell them typically on getting the whole set. We offer the workbooks and, a discount and things like that. But then obviously, like in your case where you bought it 2 years ago, we do an average of about 2 books a year in the children's series that we continue to put out. And so we have all these families who, bought the set, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, last year, but we're always putting out new books. And so TuttleTwins.com/products is where we have the whole list and where you can find the individual books that have come out since, in your case, a couple of years ago, where you bought the books. And we're always trying to just create more content because, over the years, it's been interesting as we produce all these. We get a lot of just amazingly positive response from parents, but then kind of the complaint or the criticism is, when's your next one coming out? I don't want to wait too long. Like, why like, whoa, slow down. Like, this isn't my full-time job. This is kind of a little side hustle here, but it's just a ton of fun. It is so rewarding. I mean, literally every day we're getting posts on social media and emails to us and stuff from parents who are just like, holy cow. Like I got one the other day where it was a grandma, and she's apart from her grandchildren right now during this quarantine life. But what she did is she bought a set of the books for herself and then a set of the books for her grandchildren. And then she reads to them over FaceTime on the iPad, and each of them read along with their book. And she's like, they love swimming in the pool. And so when their mom was telling them, hey, it's, swimming time, she's like, I was amazed. They both declined to go swimming because they wanted to keep reading the book, and they don't really like to read very much. And so, and that is indicative of so many responses we get from parents. I got one from a dad not too long ago where he's like, my daughter will only read Barbie books. I've tried and tried and tried and tried to get her to read other things, and she won't. But she loves the Tuttle Twins. And so it's very odd because like we've struck a chord, or there's some kind of winning formula here, which, you know, it's not like we're just making the books and apparently they're being well received, and that's great. But it's just so motivating for us to see the positive response, not just like, hey, there's books they like reading. It's not just, you know, reading random books. It's the conversations that are happening between parents and their children, not only when they're reading the books together, but we'll get these stories from time to time where recent one was a parent was like, we were walking through the grocery store and I asked my daughter why there were so many kinds of potato chips. And the daughter was like, oh, it's division of labor. Like, what? Like, my 7-year-old's an economist now, you know? Like,
That is
because some people like ridges and some people like baked and some people like fried. And anyways, it's great to give kids and their parents this foundation where later in life, a month later, a year later, they're going to have these kind of concepts around in their head. They're going to, because our brains really receive information well through storytelling, and we're using stories here, it kind of sits in their brain a little bit more. They can recall it, they can apply it. That's something that a lot of parents, I think, are excited about because this is very useful information for the world that we live in.
It so is. And I asked you how to pronounce your name, and then I did it right, but then the name of your organization, you pronounced it different than I did. Will you say that for me again?
So we say Libertas Institute. Libertas is the Roman goddess of liberty. So the Statue of Liberty, her name is actually Libertas, but it's a dead language, you know, Latin. And so most people say Libertas, and we say Libertas, and it's tomato, tomato, whatever you want to do.
Gotcha.
Not to take away from the book, but so you explained how the book, the book came because of the kids. But how did you get involved in Libertas?
Libertas.
Yes. How did you get involved
Emphasis
in
on
that?
the bear.
Yeah.
Libertas. Okay.
You have like the Italian hand motion. It's Libertas.
Okay.
I got involved, let's see, I want to say it was about 2005. And I was actually invited to watch this documentary that had just come out at the local library. I think my uncle invited me, and it was called America, Freedom to Fascism. And I wasn't super political. I was, I'd pay attention to current events or whatever, but I wasn't very political. And this documentary had just come out, and it was the gentleman, the guy who produced it, he has since deceased. His name's Aaron Rousseau. And it was his attempt to say, here are the ideals upon which America was founded, why it was so revolutionary, why it was such a leap ahead for personal freedom and free markets and prosperity and so forth. And then look how we've declined. And so it was his attempt to show the contrast of like, here's where we were, here's where we're, and in some ways we've gotten better, clearly. But in terms of like founding ideals and protections and freedoms and so forth, there's been a lot of decline and a lot of, growth of government and taxes and so forth. So I watched that documentary and I was like, wow, that made a lot of sense. And there was a gentleman in particular in that documentary who I thought made a whole lot of sense. I'd never heard of him before. And a little subtitle on the bottom of the screen said, Congressman Ron Paul. And so I'm like, this guy. So, I looked him up. I watched some YouTube videos of his speeches in Congress, and he had like a recommended list of books, about like free market economics and freedom and so forth. And so I started reading a lot of these books, and that just sent me down the rabbit hole. I started working on political campaigns. I started doing a blog where I would kind of share what I learned, which led into writing books, which led into, me seeing like, I enjoy this stuff a lot. How can I make a career out of it so that it's not just, another side hustle that my wife gets frustrated that I have too many side hustles, that aren't paying the bills. And
I wouldn't know anything about that, being married to a serial entrepreneur. So yeah.
So we found a way. I started the nonprofit. I was able to quit my job. I was a web developer back in the day, and I quit my job and jumped into this full time and haven't looked back since. So it's I credit a lot of my own kind of intellectual development and political engagement to Ron Paul. he was kind of a foot in the door for me, and progressed a whole lot since then. But that's kind of how I got started, roughly about 15 years ago.
And you said you work with helping with the regulations of food trucks and stuff like that. And, in the whole world,
there's a story about that.
right.
Yeah.
But the whole world, it's a small thing in compared to what's going on around the world, but yet it's a big thing because, like in Utah, I imagine, I would think that Utah was a pretty free state, but it's not, is it? They're chipping you from the small things up, right?
It's interesting, even in states that are, quote unquote red states or Republican states, where you still have crazy amounts of regulation, and a lot of these are not like some tyrant came through and said, we're gonna, stop food trucks from selling. What it is some city council, 30 years ago passed some broadly worded law that's like, oh, well, for food, you need to have restrooms, and you need to have this, that, and the other. And they wrote it in a way where they couldn't contemplate the future. They didn't know food trucks would really become kind of an industry all on their own and popular. But the law was worded in such a way that when food trucks come on the scene, all of a sudden the city's like, oh, well, we have to enforce the law. And so you can't do this. And then, of course, it's hard to change the law because the mayor is friends with, the local brick and mortar restaurant, owner. And he likes the fact that the law prevents his competitors from doing business, and so he donates to the mayor, and says, let's keep the law in place. The stuff like that, it's in my experience, it's less malicious, people trying to pass bad laws. A lot of it is just unintentional. It's old law that couldn't contemplate new business models. You clearly have cases where people just, like with guns, right? They're like, no, I just don't think anyone should have an AR-15, and so blah blah blah. But in a lot of cases, I think the growth of government is kind of inadvertent and just, poorly written laws that then bureaucrats get to broadly apply to people and cause them problems. So yeah, even in a state like Utah, that a lot of people, I'm from California originally, and clearly I think it was an upgrade there in terms of me having fewer taxes and more freedom. But it's all relative. I tell people, like, it's like being graded on a curve, right? So maybe a state like Utah or Texas or Arizona or something is going to be getting grade A, but that doesn't mean we have a ton of freedom. It doesn't mean life is great and government is small and so forth. It just means that we suck less than everyone else.
Right.
Right. We're being graded on a curve and we're better than others, but that, a lot of politicians will be like, oh, we got the top ranking in this index or blah, blah, blah. Right. We're so great. And I'm like, okay, well, pat yourselves on the back a little, but there's clearly more opportunity to improve. And so that's kind of what our work is in a state like this, is saying, like, guys, yeah, we're better than others, but man, we still have a long ways to go.
Right. Even in Arizona here, we have a lot of, great people and great congressmen and whatever, but we still have some pockets of problems where they want more control. And that, for some reason, that bleeds out. It doesn't go the other way. It seems it always goes to more regulations, more restrictions. And I don't understand why that is. I guess it's just easier to sit back and do nothing.
Yeah, I think it is. A lot of people don't know how to get involved and what to do about it. So I think there is a lot of, apathy, in the sense that, like, maybe if people were pointed in the right direction, then they would be able to accomplish more. But without that, then they kind of struggle to know what to do.
And that's what we come to these books for. That they give you a point of view and a point to go to, right?
And start with young people. Which, this is a great segue to my next question, is that these days it does seem like young adults are far too eager to push freedom away, which seems bizarre to me because, the minute that I started to smell freedom, that I was going to turn 18 and I was going to be an adult and start.
Then you got married.
Then I got married. That's true. We've been married 35 years this year.
We quit counting at 35.
It's true. But the idea of continuing to ask permission from an authority figure once I left home, to me, was head spinning. So why do you think that young adults in this particular generation, and it's the millennials and a little bit younger, why do you think they're struggling to embrace freedom?
Oh, I think the answer is very easy, but it's a very unpopular answer among most people, and that is the public school system.
Mm,
I believe very strongly that, and I don't even like calling it public schools. They're government schools. The curriculum is
mm,
decided by government. They're controlled by government. They're mandated by government. They're funded by government. These are government schools. Is the government school really going to teach people about the problems with government? Are government
hmm.
schools really going to help kids understand why government is dangerous and where it has exceeded its bounds? Especially when you go back through history and you look at the architects of the modern government education system, the John Deweys and Goodlads and others. These were secular humanist progressives who very much saw individuals as being needed to be subordinated to the whole, the collective. They're collectivists. They felt that individuals should be basically conformed to the ideals that they felt people should kind of turn out to be, rather than this idea of like, decentralized, everyone's different and diverse, and we all kind of have our own path. They very much wanted everyone on this singular path of conformity, which is the system that we have now. And so if you go pull out a social studies textbook, if you go look at the material being taught to these kids, it is stripped of any question of government abuse and overreaching authority. And so these kids go through the school system and come out the other end and have been taught, they've been pledging allegiance faithfully every day. And they've been taught that, our government has done all these wonderful things. And if they've even been taught anything about government at all. And so I think that leads to an outcome where you have a citizenry, a group of voters who are completely ignorant to history. They're ignorant to problems with government and how to counteract them and what the solutions are. And so if our school system, if the government school system has failed, or you might say if it's succeeded based on the ideals of its architects, but from my vantage point, if it has failed to educate the rising generation about a lot of these ideas of freedom and the philosophy of liberty and free markets and so on and so forth, then what? And to me, the answer is, well, parents have to step in and do what is naturally their own responsibility. It is parents' duty to make sure that their children are learning these things. And for many parents, that's very daunting. And I'm not saying everyone has to homeschool. That's not what I'm preaching here. But what I am saying is that if your children are in the government school system, recognize, for example, let's say you're Christian and you send, let's say you're a Christian during the time of Christ and your kids are going to Caesar's schools. Do you really question whether your child is going to end up being a blind, obedient subject of Rome? So are we turning our children and their most formative years or intellectual development over to those who maybe have different interests than we do and different philosophies and different ideas? And so I think parents need to step up and say, well, even if my kids are going to be in the government schools, I need to make sure that they're understanding good history. I need to make sure they understand about free markets and personal freedom and individual rights and true history and so forth. So that's why I get excited about the Tuttle Twins books, because it becomes kind of a supplement that parents can use to say, like, I don't know what my kid is learning in school. I'm kind of worried about it. Like, at least I can control what they learn at home. And so I can use books like the Tuttle Twins to help and make sure they're being exposed to good information, knowing that the schools, the textbooks, the teachers likely are not only probably not teaching that material, but if they are teaching something like that, they're probably teaching the opposite. They're teaching central planning and they're teaching, Keynesian economics and the government can do no wrong, and messages that I think have contributed to the broader problems that we have in our society today.
Well, it's a new look on schools, because I always wondered, why aren't they teaching history? Why aren't they teaching how to write a check and teaching you how to? They want you to be dependent on them, and they don't want you to learn how to grow and be independent. They want you to learn to be a subject,
Function in the real
right?
world.
That's interesting.
So that is very interesting. And so then I was like, I agree with what you're saying, and I'm also seeing, so not only are they getting the message, young people, myself included. I graduated high school in '84, and so I think that might have been really sort of the beginning of this, what I think is really a politicalization. Maybe it was political before, but it definitely, I could see it while my daughter was in school. Her senior year was the election year between Obama and McCain.
Mm.
And, she's conservative. And so McCain's what we had. God bless him. And so, she would try to speak from where our family came from. And she was like this lone voice of this sea of high schoolers that, we're thinking, how is there so much, groupthink going on here? And then knowing that Obama was elected and how it became such a part of the national conversation that somehow America is like, we're pledging allegiance and America's great, but at the same time, America's garbage somehow because, we've only done evil, wrong things as a nation. It's this really weird mixed bag that kids are being given. And then that makes me feel like, so are they just trying to make them go, I just won't have an opinion because I don't want to be wrong? I mean, I wasn't even planning to talk about that, so I'm kind of throwing that at you sideways.
Well, it's kind of it's an interesting predicament. I think about it maybe on the other side. Those of us who value freedom, think about what it's going to be like to celebrate Independence Day this year, right? Like, what is the 4th of July in 2020 going to look like? How do we really celebrate freedom in a time when we basically don't have any right now? I mean, that's being obviously painting with a broad brush, but man, the government is exercising literally dictatorial powers that in America have never really been utilized. And you're having people arrested for playing at the beach all by themselves with no one around. You're having, skate parks filled with sand and kids arrested. You're having cops show up at a little kid's birthday party where the cops aren't wearing masks or gloves, but they're separating everyone and shutting it down because those people weren't wearing masks and gloves. You're having people trying to go to worship at church and being told they can't and being ticketed and put into government databases. You're having
you can go to Walmart.
Yeah, you can go to Walmart. You can't go to church. You're having business owners who are like, you know what? To heck with you. I'm going to open my business. And then in one state, I saw a video where literally a SWAT team showed up with guns drawn to get the business to shut down. So to me, it's like, yeah, America is great in a lot of ways, but it's got a lot of problems. And those of us who value freedom, I think, need to have open eyes about what those problems are and be at least speaking out, talking to other people in our social circles or social media and generating conversation, if not organizing and trying to figure out how to apply pressure and how to affect change. Because what's the point of celebrating Independence Day when we have a society that is almost wholly dependent on government? You have churches and newspapers and businesses sucking at the teat of the federal government right now with these paycheck protection, free money. And you have everyone getting $1,200. And we have conversations now about universal basic income. And let's just give all Americans money all the time. And do we have independence? Like what are we celebrating this year? To me, it's a very interesting conundrum that we're in to say, what is the fate or the state of freedom in 2020? And what are we celebrating? Is it kind of a memorial to the liberty that once existed? And, oh, that was so nice when we had it. Or is there something to celebrate now? If so, great, let's celebrate it. But I think we need to be really realistic about the state of our society and what our freedoms actually look like right now. And then hopefully get to work trying to do something about it.
But we are seeing a lot of people that are realizing that they have no freedoms anymore. And they're starting to do things. And that should help, especially come time for voting season.
Well, I hope so. I hope it gets people more engaged and causes them to question and to want to learn more. And again, I mean, these books are so beautiful because, yeah, we're teaching our children, wink, but we're also learning a lot ourselves, wink. So, and they're very bite-sized, they're not, like trying to read the actual Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, which is, quite lengthy. There's this nice little miniature version
And ours doesn't have all the sex and the objectivism. So
There you go. There you go.
anyone who didn't like that, which is a lot of people, we stripped all that from our book.
For sure. But it's so interesting where our conversation ended up going, because every single one of our shows, we start with a speech. It happened to be President Ronald Reagan, but it's that speech where he says that, freedom's not in our DNA. And if we don't pass it along to the next generation, there's going to be a time when, our children and our children's children look to us and go, tell us about the time when men were free. Tell us about that. That seemed like a pretty cool time, and what happened, and why are we not living that anymore? And I think the education is really, it's everything. And I agree with you that, some of us don't have the, liberty or the, whatever it is. We haven't organized our lives in such a way that homeschooling naturally fits with us economically, or however it might be. I find myself homeschooling a 5-year-old right now, and it is not my natural gift. Let me just say this, but it's an amazing time. And I'm seeing her start to be able to read the, Run Dog Run type books. And what an amazing feeling that is, that I was directly a part of that if we hadn't been in this season, I wouldn't have. So take this time and do something new and start to learn. But now I'm going to really put you on the spot. Do you have a favorite? Which one's your favorite?
So, I probably most like The Road to Serfdom, the Tuttle Twins and The Road to Serfdom.
Okay.
And this one is based off of a book called The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek, a Nobel laureate, free market economist. And it's interesting because I think the book has so many aspects that are relevant to our day. Like, the book really talks about individualism versus collectivism, and central planning versus people planning for themselves. There's even, we sent an email about this to our customers a week or two ago, but there's even a page talking about, so there's the drawing about individualism and collectivism. There's even a page where we talk about a shortage of toilet paper. Keep in mind, this was written, a couple years ago, 3 years ago. And in the book, it's talking about how central planning can be problematic. When the government tries to do all these things, it leads to shortages. And can you imagine not having toilet paper? Oh my gosh, that would be crazy. And yet here we are right now, when there's been a run on toilet paper and people hoarding TP at home. So I like that one because I think it has a message that's so relevant to what we're dealing with right now. And frankly, what we often and regularly deal with. It has a description about government versus individuals that applies, I think, throughout the ages. And so it's one that I've been kind of thinking back on in light of what we've been dealing with right now. And it was just a fun book to work on, that one in particular.
Oh, look, there was a time when people were allowed to be on the beach.
Yeah.
Look at that.
There's no police officer there shutting them down.
Imagine. Oh my goodness.
No, the guy on the beach
Yeah.
is a criminal they released from jail. So he's allowed on the beach.
Yes.
So that they could put the guy that had the restaurant in jail.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Well, as long as they don't start worshiping Jesus along the way, they'll be fine.
Oh, gasp.
No religious services.
Well,
Let me clutch my pearls.
We are being allowed. We are being allowed to open up partially this Friday, right?
Yeah, allowed.
Allowed. We're allowed.
That.
And
I love that word.
It's like, this is exciting. We get to do something. I think the government, any government that's taken over their people has done it by fear.
Yes.
And they're putting fear in us right now. Yeah. There's people that I've talked to that tremble when they talk about the coronavirus.
Right.
That they think that if they breathe air, they're going to die.
It's so sad.
Mm-hmm. So
they watch too much
fear.
News.
Yes.
Right. I'm air quoting for the people that are listening to this as audio only. So my favorite, which it's hard to have a favorite, but my favorite is The Creature from Jekyll Island. And I will tell you why. Because one of my relatives, my sister-in-law, has been telling me, cajoling me, guilting me into reading the book that this was created from, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, for, holy cow, I can't even tell you how many years now. And so finally I was like, ooh, here we go. I can read.
Condensed version.
Yes. And so, of course, this is the central banking, right? The Federal Reserve.
Yep, all
And
about inflation and banks and money. What is sound money? And what do central banks do that's so problematic? So yeah, that's definitely relevant.
I love that it is
Well, I haven't read the book, but don't they just print more money?
yeah.
They print and print and print. That's exactly right. Again, very relevant to what we're dealing with today, for sure.
Yeah, a big octopus is kind of the way that you've portrayed the creature in that book. And this one, the law, the fact that it is, and again, I'm going to mess this word up, but it's based on a book called The Law by Frederick Bastiat.
Yeah, he was a French economist. So if you're good at pronouncing French, I think it would be like Bastiat or
There you
Bastiat or
go.
something like that.
And so at the back, not only do you tell us a little bit about the original author and pique our interest, but also in this one, you show us that you have his book for sale at your website. And I beat a path to get that purchased. So, it takes you to the next step. These books kind of take you to the next step and pique your interest to want to know more. And I think that is the perfect kind of book to lay out there.
That's definitely the goal, right? We want to introduce our readers to these ideas. And for those who want to learn more, we want to send them in that direction. We want to say, here's the next step. Here's a book to read to keep learning, along your path. Kind of here's some of the additional resources. And so that's very much kind of our interest, is to kind of whet their appetite. And then for those interested, we could say, here's where you can keep learning.
And then you have written, as we said, 21 books. And so some of them are for, adults. They're not all, for the teenagers or the 5 to 11 group. And again, I beat a path, and this one is hopefully in the mail to me as we speak, because I was on your website the other day. It's called Feardom, How Politicians Exploit Your Emotions, to what Danny was saying, and what you can do to stop them.
That won't be relevant at all to what's happening right now.
No, it's just so outdated. It's a shame.
I wrote that one. I want to say it was maybe 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And when I finished that book, I was reading it kind of a final time, and I had the thought occur to me that this is a book that will never be irrelevant. And that saddened me, Frank. Like from a marketing standpoint, it's like, oh, there's always going to be a hook to kind of talk about the book. Here we are years later, people are buying the book and we're talking about the book. But so from a marketing standpoint, it's great. From someone who values freedom and wants a safe and healthy society, it saddened me because routinely governments will exploit our fear in order to consolidate power. The historical record is absolutely clear. And in some cases, politicians will manufacture a crisis. In other words, they'll create one out of whole cloth. But in most cases, they leverage an existing one, or they will hype it, right? Coronavirus, clearly a problem. But it's been overhyped to the degree that the government has been able to exercise all these dictatorial powers and do what they want and control people and set a precedent that for the next crisis, they'll be able to say, oh, well, we did it before, or, oh, like it wasn't that bad when we did it before. We got through it. So here we're going to do the same thing again, or a little bit more aggressive. That's how governments grow, is incrementally. Very rarely is it this brazen, night and day contrast where you can be like, whoa, it's very much the frog boiling in water kind of metaphor, where bit by bit by bit. And so when we are scared, we naturally seek support from someone who has more information than we do, and who has a proposed way to make us feel safe. And so if you are a politician, if you're in the media, if you're a wannabe dictator, you naturally portray yourself as a decision maker, as an information gatherer, as someone who's in a position to know what should be done and then tell others. And because we lack information, because we don't know what's true or not, we as a people naturally defer to the media, naturally defer to the government, to say, tell us what to do, and we will comply like good sheep. And that is how we are led along to our slaughter, because we don't know any better, and because so few of us really put in the effort and the energy to seek truth and to try and seek alternative voices and really understand what's happening. politicians have long seen that when there's something bad happening, something scary, oh, there's terrorists, they're gonna, maybe fly another plane at some point in the future. Therefore, we're going to molest, millions of people every year just because you want to feel safe. We trade our security, we trade our liberty for security, and I think the end result is that we are neither secure nor free.
Absolutely.
Isn't that kind of happening in New York right now? Isn't there a guy that goes on TV every day and talks for about an hour or two about all this Corona stuff right now? Is that kind of like fear and I've got control of things and I know the best thing to do and how to serve? How for you to serve?
I might have seen a couple of his news conferences. Let's talk about your another one of your books, Lessons from a Lemonade Stand. Very interesting title. Talk to us about that one, and we'll start wrapping up and let you get on out of here.
So we've seen the stories across the country in years past about little kids' lemonade stands getting shut down. Every time one of these headlines pop up, we're all outraged because how crazy is it that this staple of summertime in America is illegal, and it routinely is shut down. We've got a number of stories. You Google if you were to Google, lemonade stand shut down, you would be appalled at the number of stories countrywide of some police officer or county health department bureaucrat or whatever going up to little kids and saying, "Oh, you don't have a food handler's permit. You don't have a business license." And they're selling like 50-cent cups of lemonade, and they're expected to pay an $80 fee for a permission slip. It's nuts. And so Lessons from a Lemonade Stand is a book that uses that encounter, that issue, as an example through which to analyze what is wrong about that. And by analyzing what is wrong, we unpack it and talk about, well, what are rights? What should we be able to do without a permission slip? Why does the government want to require a permission slip? When have we ever said that those permission slips are okay? What does it mean to consent? When governments operate with the consent of the governed, what does consent actually look like? Do we have consent today? Or just by virtue of the fact that we were born here and live here, does that mean that we've actually consented to the government that we live under? And if we've consented, you cannot meaningfully give consent without the opportunity to dissent and say no. And so what does dissent look like in our society? Is the government okay with dissent? And how does someone meaningfully assert their rights? Think of it in kind of a intimacy between a couple, right? There's consent there between two consenting adults, but one of them can dissent and say, no, I refuse. And when that relationship continues under a dissenting, that's molestation, it's rape, it's abuse or whatever. And so that, to me, is the analogy for our government, where we have to consent for these things to be meaningfully and properly done. But when we dissent and the government is still doing it, that's tyranny. Mm-hmm. And so what does dissent actually look like? So we use the lemonade stand as kind of the lens through which to look at all these different ideas and really boil down, what is government? What are our rights? How do we assert them? And what is the proper relationship that we should have between government and individuals? And so Lemonade Stand kind of introduces the concept. The book was written more for teens, but just like the Tuttle Twins books, when you write it at kind of a little simpler level, it just makes it that much more appealing to adults who don't have to read some thick academic, type book. And so that was a really fun one to write. It's been out for a few years and done really well because, like the Tuttle Twins, I think families are always trying to look at, like, how do I teach my kids about this kind of stuff? Yes. And so that one resonates really well with kind of the teenager level of reader.
Well, when I was a kid, way back then, we had lemonade stands. The police would come and buy from the lemonade stands to help support. And, I think that lemonade stands is a great example of people who want to become a business people, because it gives them a chance to see how they can make some money and move on. And I sold jewelry at school when I was 6 and 7 years old, and, oh, God, I didn't have a permit.
Yeah.
I didn't collect sales tax.
You rebel.
Oh, I know. And that's the other thing, to get to sell in our state, you have to have a sales tax license. By getting a sales tax license, we have to collect the sales tax. Mm-hmm. We're working for the government to collect the sales tax, and then be audited to make sure that we're doing it properly. And that's we consent to that when we sign this agreement to get a sales tax license.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not right. But what do you do when you can't? I mean, there's no.
And is it real consent? Because you're being told that you're not allowed to sell things and engage in commerce unless you sign on the dotted line. It's kind of extortion, right?
Yes.
It's. I mean, forgive the example, but it's a gun to your head saying sign or else, and you can't really consent under that type of duress.
Yeah.
And so again, these are the intoxicating questions to be like, okay, well, if the Declaration of Independence says that the just powers of government are derived from the consent of the governed, does our government really have consent? And that's a very dangerous question, perhaps.
Yes.
I love it. Dangerous freedom. Well, we will start wrapping up. But thinking about all of this reminds me of something I read a long time ago, and might have even been in my studies of psychology, because that's what my degrees are in. But what I was told was that when people who look for counterfeit money, the FBI, they don't study all the different ways that people have counterfeited. They study what the actual original genuine article should look like, and they have that completely imprinted on their mind, so that when they see what isn't genuine, it jumps out at them. And I think that what we're talking about here today and what your books offer is that opportunity to study the genuine article, the original, what is freedom. So then when we see the lack of freedom or something that's infringing on freedom, it jumps out at us, and maybe we have a little better opportunity to react in ways that will resist that. What do you think of that idea?
I like that example a lot. I think that contrast is important. You cannot defend rights that you don't know exist. If you don't know what your rights look like, how do you defend against an attempt to encroach upon them? If you and I are neighbors and you begin to inch onto, my front yard bit by bit, and you're moving your lawn furniture and you're this, that, and the other, but if I don't know where the property line is, where the boundary is, how do I know when to say stop, go no further? If we don't understand our rights, then we are forever on defense. And frankly, we don't even know that a game is being played, and they just run into our end zone time and again, steal the ball, capture the flag, or whatever. So
I love it.
That's why I think education is critical, because we have to understand what our rights are. We have to understand the proper role of government, because only then, by understanding those truths, as you point out, will we understand the counterfeits, the violations, the problems, whatever they look like, however they manifest, even in Republican state or a Democrat state, even from a conservative governor or politician. We have to be able to see, well, oh, wait a minute, that appears to be an infringement of my rights, and so that's a problem. Even though you're a great guy and I like you or whatever, but what you're doing is a problem. We have to be able to recognize that. So I really like your example that by recognizing the truth, we can see what the falsehoods are more easily.
I love it. Well, thank you for weighing in on that. So tell folks, how do they buy these amazing books? How do they follow the work that you do at Libertas Institute, and all the work that you're doing there in Utah?
So for the books, you can go to TuttleTwins.com. That's TUTTLE, TuttleTwins.com. You'll find out all about the books there, get a discount, get the free workbooks and everything. Now, if you're interested in our kind of legal work in Libertas Institute, what I would actually suggest is finding the group that's in your community. We work in Utah. Most of your listeners probably aren't here then. So if you go to spn.org, that stands for State Policy Network, spn.org. You go to the directory, you'll click on your state, and you'll see who are the groups working in my state, working on, free market, libertarian, conservative type issues. Go look them up. See what events, they're doing. Subscribe to their email list. Follow them on social media. Pay attention to what they're doing and see how you can help in your community, work for more freedom. So I would encourage everyone to go look up the groups working in their state and figure out how to follow and support them. If you're interested in learning more about me, just Google Connor Boyack. You'll find all sorts of crazy stuff. The good, the bad, the ugly, the fun. Really appreciate coming on here. And again, just for the books, it's just at TuttleTwins.com is the easiest place to go.
Well, Connor, when you get done with Utah and getting it straight, why don't you come down to Arizona and help us out a little bit?
Sounds good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all that you do. Connor Boyack of Libertas Institute and the Tuttle Twins books. Thank you
Thank
so
you guys.
much.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right.
Wow, the most I got out of this is the way the schools are teaching the kids.
And we feel it.
Oh yeah,
we
we've
see
always
it.
wondered, why didn't they talk about the history?
Yeah, but we're like, how we don't know what to do about it. But this opportunity to start teaching our kids from home, even though it is hard, it's hard. Okay, I understand it's hard.
I mean,
but it's a great opportunity to start instilling your own family values into your children.
but they're government-run schools.
Mhm.
They're controlling what the teachers say, and the
Mhm.
teachers are government paid.
Mhm.
So now I understand why.
Well, and each generation of students that have graduated from high school and then graduated from college, it just starts taking care of itself. It's not like somebody has to force them to say what they've
Right.
been taught to believe. They just naturally continue to say what they've been taught to believe. But we really have to run. We have to wrap up and run. What a fun show. I
Yeah.
was so looking forward to this because I love the idea of these books. I've read every one of them. Can't wait to get the next batch of Tuttle Twins books, read them to our granddaughter, learn myself a lot of stuff, and get Connor Boyack's other books. But thank you so much to Connor for taking the time. He's a busy dude, came on here, spent a lot of time with us. Thank you so much to our listeners, because that's where the rubber hits the road with all of this. We enjoy these conversations, but they, when they have legs to move forward, because the listeners, you wonderful people listening and watching, either listening on GunFreedomRadio.com or watching on YouTube or GunStreamer, when you take these ideas into your own families, into your spheres of influence, and talk about them and hash them through and turn them over and work the puzzle of them into your own lives, now we have something. Now we are passing that torch of freedom forward, and we couldn't do that without you. So thank you so much. And until next time, pray for our nation, pray for our leaders in whatever capacity they are operating.
All of them?
All of them, Dan. Even the ones you don't like, especially the ones you don't like. Be good to each other. Are you going to?
Well, I just wanted to say all that I don't. It's not that I don't like them. I don't want there to be leaders that are trying to take our rights away from us.
That's true. I think there always will be, though. So if we pray for them, maybe they'll
Pray for them to what?
they'll have a change of
What are we going to pray?
a change of heart, that they'll read the Tuttle Twins books and they'll go, holy cow, I have been on the wrong side of this whole freedom equation, and I'm going to straighten up.
If they read the Tuttle Twin books, then they'll outlaw the books.
Not if the rest of us have something to say about it.
That's right. So,
all right. Have a great week. Be good to each other, and God bless.